Forum Communications Company is proud to be a part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org. Hey folks, before we get started, I just wanted to tell you, you can unlock unlimited access to political news, commentary, opinion, and a whole lot more at inforum.news/port for only 99 cents a month for your first 3 months. Hurry, get this limited time offer at inforum.news/port now. This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy Wednesday to you. I'm joined, as I always am on Wednesdays, by my co-host, Chad Oban. And also, our guest is the new advocacy manager for the North Dakota branch, the North Dakota chapter of the ACLU, gentleman by the name of Cody Schuler. Cody, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a North Dakota native. I grew up in a little town near Jamestown on a farm, but ended up moving to Bismarck when I was a teenager. And so I graduated from Century High and left North Dakota to go to college and kind of did graduate work and lived in South Dakota for a while and eventually ended up coming back here to North Dakota.
I was shaking my head pretty hard at that Century High thing rather than Bismarck High Demons, but that's a whole nother thing. So why ACLU? You've worked in advocacy and with Homeless Coalition and other groups. Why the ACLU? Why was this appealing to you? And what do you expect to be doing in the state?
Well, I love advocacy work as a whole. I've been a part of some capacity of doing advocacy, probably in every job that I've had, and working, as you mentioned, worked in homelessness prior with the Fargo-Moorhead Coalition to End Homelessness, and did some statewide advocacy as well as local advocacy there. And I believe that housing is fundamental to so many other things in life, and I also believe that there are other pieces of advocacy and rights that need to be defended and advanced. And I've loved working in homelessness all these years, but also the opportunity to be able to work on broader issues was really exciting to me and appealing. I actually got to work with the ACLU on a couple of different projects in the past while working with the Homeless Coalition. And so I was familiar with their work, have always been a fan of the work that they do, not only here, but across the country. And so I took the opportunity when it opened.
I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the ACLU.
You're not the only one, Rob.
Yeah.
Right, left, center. Everybody has a love-hate relationship.
Right. A lot of the folks who are big ACLU supporters, a lot of our supporters have at least one or two beefs with something.
Sometimes they have like a very principled, like the ACLU. I think very surprisingly opposes hate speech ordinances, which have been a big issue in a lot of places, and I agree with that. Not because I have any particular love of hate speech, but I think it makes the job of finding justice in the criminal justice system harder than it needs to be. I think it reduces the amount of justice that we're going to get. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. What's the big priority in a state like North Dakota? Like what's the group focusing on?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's what we're trying to figure out, or what I'm trying to figure out, I should say. Obviously, as someone who's lived in North Dakota for much of my life and have been active in advocacy work, I have a lot of thoughts and ideas about what we might need to be focusing on as the ACLU here in our state. And at the same time, part of my job as a community organizer is to find out what people across the state think are the issues we should be working on. And so I've just joined the role. I've not been doing this for long, about a month. And I am task number one, aside from, learning how to, fill out your expense report and getting all your HR in order and IT, et cetera. On top of all of those basic, new job kinds of things. One of the very first things that I'm working on is to visit with folks across the state to be able to find out what's important to them, what are the areas that within the ACLU wheelhouse that are important to them. So I'm just getting started on that. I'm not an attorney. I don't have a legal background. My degrees are in English and philosophy and theology, so I don't have any any legal background. But at the same time, also understand the hard work that's before us in a lot of different areas. So
yeah,
I'm taking a lot of meetings and stuff with folks across, and I'll talk to anybody, community leaders, everyday citizens that may not see themselves as leaders, to be able to talk. And what's really cool is that one of the byproducts of the pandemic has been that we're all used to doing virtual meetings, and so I can get around the state pretty easily, pretty quickly on any given day.
I'll tell you, it's made my job interviewing some of our state officials who are, let's say, less than tech savvy. Having them be forcibly introduced to this has made reaching them and getting them on and interviewing them a heck of a lot easier. By the way, I'm a college dropout, so don't let that stop you. I don't let it stop me.
No.
So Cody, I think you're coming into this role at a really interesting time. Mm-hmm. I think with my experience in the state and sort of working on center left stuff, it seems like ACLU sort of is in and out. It seems like their influence and their engagement has, depending on who the staff person is, really engaged in a lot of things. But, I'm just thinking about Roe v. Wade and the likely overturning of that. I assume that's an issue that ACLU, issues around choice and based on the posters behind your head, is something that you guys, certainly nationally, have worked a lot on. Is that an issue you expect to be sort of involved in?
Yeah, in fact, we already have. I mean, talk about baptism by fire. Right away. First couple weeks on the job, having the leaked opinion, and of course, knowing that it was going to be coming up, I just thought it'd be a little bit later in the summer, right? That we'd be having this conversation. So I think that yes, it will be. I think that we are ramping up for a busy year with issues that will affect North Dakotans. Like I said, I'm trying to figure out a lot of those are, but abortion rights definitely is going to be at the top of the list. It's not just about me figuring out what we want to, what we should be working on. It's also responding to what is the issue of the day, and that definitely is one of them. So we know that the court could soon overturn Roe v. Wade, and the rights of millions of Americans and many North Dakotans are on the line, right? And so we're going to continue to fight on that. We're going to continue to work on that, whether that's at the legislature, on the street, on the ballot box. We're looking for folks to join us there. I'll also say too, when I say a little baptism by fire, I was a couple weeks into the job and we were already having, protests on the street, hence the sign behind me, being able to, participate with citizens who were responding. I mean, we had a great turnout here, partnering with Planned Parenthood and others just a couple of weeks ago, where there was a National Mobilization Day. We had close to we estimate 800 folks across the state that participated, about 400 here in Fargo, and then another 400 around the state, taking to the streets, standing in the front of City Hall here in Fargo, and being ready to speak up. This is something that's close to the hearts of a lot of folks. It's a right, a constitutional right that we don't want to see taken away, and so we're going to fight on that.
One of the things that I struggle with the ACLU, and I think overall is it seems like we're trying to legislate in the courts a lot, and I worry about what that does for the democratic process. I think it kind of removes some of the obligation from lawmakers to craft good policy. I see Congress a lot of times just sort of punts things over and lets the courts settle things out. For instance, and I mean, not that I want to get into a litigation of abortion, but I think the Dobbs decision, the draft that we saw, was the correct one. And I think that's independent of what your view of whether abortion should be legal or not legal. There's not a right to abortion in the Constitution. It wasn't written into the Constitution. It was read into the Constitution by a previous court. And what the Dobbs decision does is put this back into the democratic process so that state legislatures, and I guess perhaps even Congress, if they act, it could settle that through a process where people who can be voted for are deciding this. Do you think, and maybe this is, you're just the wrong person given who you work for to ask this, but do you think we move too many of these issues into the courts? I would rather, as hard as it is, I think more of these issues need to be settled through democracy and not through judges issuing rulings.
Well, it's a both and. The ACLU works in the court system, obviously, as you've referenced, and so we're gonna want to defend rights. And so I can't speak for every aspect of the ACLU. I can say that from our perspective here in North Dakota, that obviously we want to work through the courts, right, to be able to defend the rights that we see that are there, that the courts have already stated in precedent that are there. But then there's a reason I'm not an attorney. I'm here to do advocacy policy work to try and we are doing that work also on the way to the ballot box. While we don't endorse candidates and work in that realm, we're also talking to candidates and working with the issues when there are issues. And so particularly on Roe v. Wade, or on this question, reproductive freedom from our perspective is a fundamental constitutional right grounded in the privacy protections of the First, Fourth, Fifth, and Ninth and 14th Amendments. And so we are here to defend that and also then to advance it. And I think, Rob, you're right. Okay, so we're going to be talking about this in the policy sphere. It's if this is the decision that's handed down, it's going to come back to us here at the state level. We're going to have that conversation in North Dakota, and so we're going to be engaged on that to be able to make sure to protect and to advance that right.
So one of the things that ACLU has been engaged in the past is issues related to non-discrimination, the rights of individuals, trans individuals. The athletic bill last session that was vetoed, and then the veto was sustained. Do you suspect we're going to see another round of sort of proactive bills in terms of non-discrimination, but also other reactive bills like the trans ban? And are you seeing anything around the country on those issues that gives you any hope that we maybe can stop fighting about issues related to trans kids?
Well, I try to be a hopeful person, so I think I always have hope. I can't particularly point at something specifically hopeful, but I do think, Chad, that we are going to be talking about that again in the upcoming legislative session. One of the things about having an every other year session here in North Dakota is that we can look around and see what's going on in other states and know that some of that's probably going to be coming our way. And it's interesting because what we do is we see around the country these template. We've seen it for years, right here, even in North Dakota. We see template bills, folks shopping around from different advocacy groups, shopping around their bills and being able to apply them then. And so we've already seen in other states a variety of concerning bills being. And I can't name any specifically right off the top of my head, but I know that in watching around that the trans issue and a number of other issues are not going to go away. I think, in fact, and we've seen this in our own state before, where a bill doesn't make it one session, or in this case was veto and the veto is sustained. That I think that we'll see. That bill or a version of it or something, might come back. I hear that all the time about over the years in the advocacy work that I've done. Things have to have the pendulum always swings, and sometimes the pendulum swing is shorter, particularly in some of these issues.
Do you feel one of the things, the perception of a group like yours is that you're left wing? I realize that's not how you want to portray your nonpartisan. I realize that's not that perception's out there, though. I can tell you how conservatives feel about the ACLU, and it's not that the ACLU is generally our friends. But I say that, like, I mean, again, I find areas where I agree with the ACLU, and I'm more than happy when I agree. Whoever's going to go with me in the direction I want to go in is my friend, as far as I'm concerned. But do you think, and this is a criticism I have of Planned Parenthood, this is a criticism I have of the NRA, where a lot of these groups I feel like have allowed themselves to become sort of de facto arms of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, as the case may be. Speaking of the NRA, I was thinking about this a lot, obviously, after what happened in Texas, and then the NRA had their national meeting. And the NRA was a much more effective organization when it was a bipartisan organization. Believe it or not, it once was. There were lots of Democratic members of the NRA. And then they allowed themselves to be sort of taken over by people who wanted to be Fox News pundits. And I don't think that was good for the NRA. And I don't think it's good for a lot of these groups to be affiliates. Mm-hmm. So you started this interview saying, you're going to be going out, you're going to be reaching out to North Dakotans and finding out what's important to them. You're going to be finding a lot of North Dakotans who believe things that the ACLU does not stand for. How do you bridge that gap and portray yourselves as an organization that's not partisan in a state like North Dakota?
Well, I think, first of all, organizing and doing advocacy and issue work is relationship based. And so, I'm always, in every job and every advocacy position I've ever held, I've tried to build relationships with people who agree or disagree with me. As we started the interview, right, we started talking about how not everybody always agrees with the ACLU. I don't, right, and I'm an employee, right. So I think that what we do is in any sort of advocacy relationship, we seek to find common ground, and the ACLU does have a lot of issues. I know there is that perception that we are just some sort of left wing, arm of the left wing, but it truly is when you look at the history of the ACLU and issues. I mean, I actually wrote recently. So one of the things that I did, starting out, getting to know folks and getting. I wrote one of our We the People blogs on our website. And one of the questions that our comms director asked me was about how I first learned about the ACLU. And I said, well, I was a teenager, a student journal. I was editor of the Century High School Star. And I remember watching the movie, The American President, and the great Aaron Sorkin speech that comes out of President Andrew Shepard's mouth, where after being accused of being a card-carrying member of the ACLU by his Republican opponent, he makes that statement. He says, the question is, yes, I am a card-carrying member. The question is, why aren't you, Bob? And says, this is an organization that defends the Constitution, defends the Bill of Rights. Why isn't that a value of yours? Why aren't you a card-carrying member? And I think that I'm not quite that direct or adversarial maybe in my response to folks who might have a particular view of the ACLU, but to look at all of the ways that the ACLU defends our civil liberties and tries to advance them. I think there's a lot more common ground there. I know that sounds cliche, right? Like, where more we agree on than we disagree on. But I mean, the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of aspects that I think we might disagree on how to get there. We might disagree in some of the nuance, but I think some of the basic principles of civil liberties are things that it doesn't matter what letter is behind your name or how you've registered or not registered to vote. So
one of my favorite stories from American history is the story of Skokie, Illinois, and you had a neo-Nazi group that wanted to hold a march through Skokie, and Skokie was picked because it was a predominantly Jewish community at the time. I don't know if it still is, but it was at the time.
It still is.
Still is. Okay, fair enough.
I spent some time living in Chicago, and actually was just there recently on vacation. And yes, it's still,
the ACLU. And the ACLU defended the rights of the Nazis to march, and the lawyer from the ACLU who was defending the Nazis was Jewish. And there's no fundamentally more American story, or maybe that's the wrong way to put it, but that's a very American story, where not only are we going to let these ugly, hateful people say these deeply unpopular things, but the people who are going to defend them are some of the people who they're saying the horrible, ugly things about. That, to me, is the standard, and I don't know. I don't know that a lot of people are living up to that standard of the free speech today. But Chad's got.
And actually, Rob, I'm glad that you lifted up that story, because that's one of the stories that I've used in talking to folks about how we work and that those principles, what is seen. And again, I think that there are definitely ways in which folks might try to talk around that, but at its core, that's who we are.
So one of the things I struggle with the premise of Rob's question is, as somebody who works for an organization who does advocacy and is often seen as partisan, I don't think many of our groups, ACLU, Planned Parenthood, maybe less so NRA, but that's my bias, like, we advocate for positions on things. the public often sees them as partisan, not necessarily our groups that see them as partisan. So part of it is just society getting more partisan on these things. And if you're Planned Parenthood or if you're the teachers union, you're obviously going to support candidates who support your positions on things. And then the public might see those as partisan issues. So I struggle a little bit with that idea that because organizations support certain positions, that makes them partisan because other people have decided they're partisan issues. So, Cody, I thought your answer was really good on what I thought was a pretty difficult question there. So, so what do you hope? Now I'm going to go back to more general questions. So what do you hope to accomplish in your role of ACLU in terms of the organization? Because you're a little unique. There's not like a North Dakota chapter of the ACLU, right? You don't have a North Dakota ACLU board. How do you build in a place when you don't have sort of your own autonomy?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that so for those who might not know, we are a 3-state chapter, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming, and so we have a shared legal department and communications department, and then advocates on the ground at each state. And we don't have our own board of directors like a lot of states do, and so we are given the latitude to be able to find what is important in our state. And so when I talk to my counterpart in South Dakota or my counterpart in Wyoming, we're all looking at and working on very different issues, even though there are some similarities between our states. And so, for instance, in working on the issue of abortion, all 3 of us are in states that have trigger bans, right? So we are able to compare notes there. But then there's lots of other things that don't match up. And so I think you're asking a good question in that I think we need to find ways to build support like you would any other organization. And I'll say this, having worked in other areas, for instance, having worked in housing and homelessness, there's lots of folks where housing touches everything from labor to
crime.
Public housing to, it touches everything, right? Workforce housing. And so you find how the place where all the issues touch, and you talk to those individuals, and you bring people together, and you had everyone from disability advocates to workforce advocates, all coming together around a shared issue of saying, hey, we need X, Y, or Z, right? The fill in the blank of the issue of the day. And so I think for me, working for the ACLU, it's finding individuals who care about the things that are within our wheelhouse, because we have our lane. There are things that we do and we don't do. Like I said, I'm not an attorney. We have a legal department. If you are a North Dakotan and you need legal, believe you have a reason to need legal assistance from the ACLU, then go to our website. There is at aclund.org. There is a Get Help section, and you can fill out that paperwork for our legal department to review. I'm on the other side of things of looking at issues, and so I'm talking to people across the state in different aspects of the work that we do, or where I see connections, or people who aren't. I want to talk to anybody who might be able to say what they see as an issue, and it might not be anything that I'm personally interested, or even something that isn't interested in, or isn't a direct connection to the ACLU, but I want it on my radar because we're talking about the rights of a free society, and you never know where things are going to connect or bump up.
Cody, I appreciate you coming on, and good luck in the new gig, and looking forward to seeing what comes of it.
I was glad to be here, and happy to come back any other time. And I'm looking forward to doing this work. Like I said, I've been in North Dakota most of my life, but this is a completely different avenue of work, and so I'm pretty excited to get started.
Good luck.
Thanks, Cody.
Thank you.
Okay, just finished up with Cody Schuler at the ACLU. Now we're going to talk about campaign finance, which has become an issue. We saw a press conference last week from the Bastiat group of lawmakers in the Republican primaries that we've been talking about all spring so far. And but before we get to that, there's a race, District 35, where Ryan Eckroth is kind of the Bastiat Caucus candidate, Sean Cleary is I don't know what you call him, the traditional Republican candidate. They're squaring off in the primary, and it's that one's been a little heated, right? There's been some revelations about Eckroth. He had his insurance license removed by the state insurance commissioner over allegations of fraud. This is something that Mr. Eckroth agreed with, although in the agreement he didn't admit to doing anything wrong, but he did surrender his license. He's got a tax lien. He's had financial difficulties. There's been some stuff there. It came out, and this is actually I first saw it on a Bastiat Caucus blog, but I thought it was newsworthy because I mean a lot of the discussion we're having right now is the governor's influence over these legislative races, and the governor and obviously people affiliated with him, his people, pouring money into these races, trying to influence these races. So you have Robbie Loff, who does not currently work for the governor, nor does he work for the governor's PAC, doesn't work for the governor in any capacity. He told me that this morning. But was sending text messages to Ryan Eckroth. And the text message basically was asking him if he supported Michael Coachman, who was kind of a fringy, he's kind of a gadfly, fringy candidate for statewide office in multiple cycles. He last ran for governor, first in the Republican primary, and then as a write-in candidate on the statewide ballot. And so Loff asked Eckroth if he supported Coachman. Eckroth was kind of like, well, who is this? Let's meet and talk. And then Loff said, oh, I'm in Bismarck. Did you support? Why can't you just tell me? And it kind of was mocking the guy. And then it turned out when they looked up the phone number, it was Robbie Loff, which Chad, given everything else that the governor is, I mean, the governor's trying to do something, obviously. He's trying to accomplish something. He's running into some headwinds for people who sort of resent him coming in and swinging his money around, trying to influence these races. And then Robbie Loff does something like this, just fundamentally unhelpful to the governor's cause, I got to think.
Robbie. You're trying to help your buddy Sean Cleary win a primary that he's well on his way to winning. If you want to figure out where Ryan Eckroth is or was on the Coachman-Burgum primary, which, by the way, 99.9% of the people voting in the District 35 Republican primary don't know who Michael Coachman is.
Don't care.
Yeah. If you want to find out that information, maybe find somebody else to send the text message to Eckroth rather than doing it as
just ask him straight up as yourself.
Yeah. Identify who you are and say, where are you on this thing? But, trying to do it cute like he did it, and it's a mockery. I mean, quite frankly, it's sort of a childish sort of move. It's something you'd see in, I don't know, a high school student body president sort of election. If I'm Sean Cleary, I'm annoyed by the help this morning that his former colleague in the governor's office did. But, I mean, come on.
I don't think
you're better than this, brother. You're better than this.
The race is not going to hinge on that, but it was a poor move. I did get a laugh at the Bastiat Caucus blog post, which was the first to highlight it. I mean, first of all, this blog is total mouthpiece for the Bastiats, but beyond that, they're going down this list of supposed sins that Sean Cleary is this terrible person, and among them is the fact that his sister. And I don't know his sister from Adam. I don't know anything. But they claim that his sister is a Democrat, Biden-loving Democrat, right? Which maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I don't know her. I don't really care if it's true or not. But it was like this implication that somehow Sean Cleary is like less of a Republican because his sister is a Democrat. And I'm thinking to myself, like, are women not allowed to disagree with the menfolk in their family? Is that what we're arguing here?
And especially his sibling. I mean, come on. And she's running for a nonpartisan office. How about we look at candidates for city commission and school board and other things on if they're competent and hey, Rob, are they gonna plow the streets? Yeah. Are they gonna get the streets plowed? Right? I mean, the fact that she supported refugees and whatever. I know to Ann a little bit, and I think she'll be a great city commissioner. I don't know if she's a Democrat, a Republican, or something on the fringes. I think she cares about her community.
I don't know. And listen, ideology, it matters, right?
Sure.
I want to know about the philosophy of my candidates, but even if she is, and I have no idea what her, I don't know this person, right? I know Sean Cleary. I don't know this person. I don't live in Bismarck. She's not really on my radar. But it's just like this idea that like, oh, she's a Democrat. Well, I'm related to Democrats too. I don't know. Does that make me a lesser person in?
So I have a story. My father, who's a Democrat, late father was a Democratic legislator whose brother was a Yankees fan, but even worse, a Republican, or maybe not worse. I don't know which one. But he was here visiting like 15 years ago, and I was working on Democrat campaigns, and he went into the GOP headquarters. He was from Tennessee and identified who he was and said, I'm Bill Oban's brother and Chad Oban's uncle, and I'm a Republican and whatever. I didn't lose any Democrat cred because my uncle Danny, who also has passed away, went in and identified as, not just a Republican. He was probably in the Bastiat type thing. But yeah, we've all got our black sheeps, right?
Well, they're not black sheeps to me. I don't know. We debated politics around the kitchen table all the time. It's probably one of the reasons why I love debating it to this day.
Well, and here's what I'll say about Sean Cleary and Ann Cleary. Just two people from Bismarck who cared greatly about their community. I don't agree with them on everything. I don't agree with anybody on everything. But sort of this tactic used by Robbie to try to get information just seems a little bit petty, particularly when I think Sean's on a good path to win this convention this nomination without doing these kind of things. He
is, and we're going to talk about campaign finance and those races in a moment. I will say I'm hearing rumblings. I don't have any. I want to put a grain of salt in front of this because nobody has showed me specific polling numbers. I don't know. So I don't know. But what I'm told by people I trust is that the non-Bastiat candidates are feeling pretty good. Jessica Bell, I think they're expecting is not going to have any problems in District 33. Sean Cleary is surprisingly tight with Eckroth, but I think a lot of that is according to the polling. I guess not a lot of the voters in that district are aware of some of Mr. Eckroth's issues with his insurance license in the past. So I don't know. I have a feeling they're going to be made aware of that in the not too distant future. That may change, but right now Cleary is definitely winning that race. Dave Elke is in good position. Bob Eberle is in good position. The one place is District 8. It kind of seems like that's going to be the battleground. That's Dave Naring versus Magrum in the Senate race. And in District 8, last cycle it was kind of a battleground. All sorts of weird stuff happened there last cycle. It's a battleground again. And then, of course, on top of it is all this money. And that brings us, Jeff Magrum was one of the candidates who were at the Capitol this week, waving flyers in the air, upset. And their argument was, does Governor Burgum's political spending violate North Dakota's Constitution? Now, by my reading of the section of the Constitution that they're reading, no, it doesn't. That section of the Constitution is about the government using his official powers, right? His ability to veto or his ability to appoint people to try to influence lawmakers. It's basically a ban on sort of quid pro quo, like, hey, vote this way on my bill and I'll appoint your brother-in-law to be the labor commissioner or something like that. That's illegal. That should be illegal. But that's not what the governor's doing. The governor's spending his own money as a United States citizen, a North Dakota citizen, to influence elections. He's allowed to do that. Even if the North Dakota Constitution did somehow explicitly make that illegal, that part of our state constitution is probably unconstitutional under the First Amendment. So I thought it was a ridiculous argument. I don't know that really gets a lot of traction with voters, but who knows?
So I think that the Bastiats are missing the whole point of all of this. It's my understanding Jeff Magrum was waving around, it looks like in that picture, a piece of mail that wasn't even from Burgum. It was from the Brighter Future PAC.
Which is Pat Finken.
Which is Pat Finken, complete dark money. At least the Burgum multi-candidate PAC has to report where their money is coming from.
That's kind of funny, because the Brighter Future, you can actually go in and look up where they're spending their money, or at least the independent expenditures. But you're not allowed to know where the money comes from. Burgum's PAC, you can know where the money comes from, but you're not allowed to know where they're spending it.
So, and you and I have talked about this in the past. Neither of these groups is doing anything illegal or wrong from my perspective, but we need transparency. The thing that's being missed here, and I think you pointed it out, there were bills last session to make a Brighter Future have to be more transparent, and the Burgum PAC be more transparent, and these Bastiat people voted against it. Why did they vote against it? Because in 2020, the Brighter Futures PAC was spending all their money against Democrats. They spent a ton of money in District 46 attacking the people running against Shannon Roars and Jim Roars. They spent a bunch of money up into the Grand Forks District 42, attacking the Democrat candidates up there. So Carla Rose Hansen, a Democrat, brings forward a bill that would make this more transparent. They all vote against it because it's a Democrat bill and it's a Democrat problem. You and I talk a lot on this show, Rob. Sometimes Democrats have good ideas. And that was a time where if they would have been thinking more big picture, we would know where Pat Finken is getting his money from to go after Dave Pepcorn and go after these conservative lawmakers. We would know where Doug Burgum is spending the money. Although I will give Burgum's PAC some credit. At least now they're admitting what districts they're playing in.
Yeah, Burgum, they have been reticent. I still maintain that they need to make the affirmative argument for what they're doing. If you're going to do this, if you're going to send the mailers, then be willing to put either the governor or one of the governor's people in front of a microphone to explain it. Just explain what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish to the voters. It's not that difficult a concept.
But I think these folks that had the press conference last week, I mean, sounded like a bunch of crybabies.
Yeah.
They're whining about a problem they had the ability to fix 2 years ago, but they refused to vote for a bill because it was sponsored by Carla Rose Hansen, a Democrat.
Well, here's the other thing too, and I wrote about this. Those folks talk all the time about principle, right? You know, conservative principle. We're consistent and we're conservative and we're principled and all this other stuff. Well, in 2015, Rick Becker voted against a Democratic resolution on it's the Citizens United issue. If you don't know what the Citizens United, it's a Supreme Court decision, along with some other decisions that found that political spending is protected free speech. So essentially, when you use your money to influence politics by donating to a cause or donating to a candidate, that is protected in the same way as your speech is. Your spending is essentially an extension of your speech. I agree with that position, but the thing is that a lot of Democrats don't. And so they passed a resolution. It was calling for an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to essentially overturn the Citizens United decision from the Supreme Court. Rick Becker voted against that resolution. And from my perspective, that was the right decision. That was the right decision. That's the principled decision to make. Political spending is speech. I agree with that vote. But now, flash forward to 2022, and I don't know, Magrum, the other people who were at the conference, Magrum, Hoverson, Sebastian Ertelt, Jason Heitkamp, who said he was going to be there but couldn't get out of work or something. None of those candidates were in the legislature when that particular vote was taken. But Becker was. He's their leader. He was the guy who was at the podium speaking at that press conference. And here he is in 2022, all of a sudden saying political spending is likely unconstitutional, I think is how he put it. Well, why didn't you believe that way in 2015 then?
Yeah, and again, and if you wanted transparency, why didn't you vote that way in 2021 at the last session when you could have done something about this? I think this is typical of this.
Well, I think I don't know how he voted. The House bill passed. That bill passed in the House.
The dark money one,
but it failed in the Senate.
Okay.
And I don't know how. I guess I would need to go back and look. I don't know how Becker voted on it. The super majorities of the Republicans and the conservatives in the legislature could have passed this bill. Well, there's been a lot of complaining from lawmakers in general. I mean, even like Chet Pollard, Rich Wardner, where they're saying they don't like the governor meddling in this stuff. Okay. Well, okay, legislature, you had a chance to put some additional reporting requirements on this, and you didn't.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Anybody who's engaged in political spending is not going to release more information than they're legally obligated to. If you're spending big money like that, the legislature has to do something. But I think this is a symptom of this group of it's not an issue until it happens to me. Right. So a brighter future, spending money against Democrats. Well, look at those Democrats just whining about dark money. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, my goodness, they're spending money against me. I'm going to do something about it. Nobody cared about the amount of money being spent in general election races until Burgum started spending money against them. Then they didn't like it. So which inconsistency,
which by the way is the opposite of being principled. Right, which is the big selling point that these guys have. We're principled conservatives. We're consistent conservatives. We believe we have a backbone. We stand up. No, you don't. You sway in the wind and you say whatever you need to say to complain about whatever's in front of you right now, and it's not based on principle at all.
And it's not based on principle. It's all self-serving.
Right.
They don't care about the good of, and it's not just on campaign finance, it's other rules, policies as well. I don't know how many people have found the light of day on things like paid leave when their spouse has been sick, right, or when their family member has gotten sick. They don't understand it until it happens to them. I think it's a difference between these folks and maybe people who see a bigger picture of the world around us.
And I want to be clear. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind about something.
You just changed your mind on red flag. Good job.
I was just going to say next week where I'm going to be talking with Representative Carla Rose Hansen Democrat from Fargo. We're going to be talking about the red flag law. Now, I still maintain that her bill was a bit of a mess. I still had problems with it. But I want to talk to her about the concept of red flag, because her bill doesn't need to be the be all end all. We can make amendments. We can, maybe introduce a new bill that could garner Republican support in the future.
But Rob, the bill did support. I mean, Rich Wardner stood up at the press conference with her. Kirsten Baszler, all the cops, all the other things. Again, this to me came down to partisanship.
No,
it was Carla Rose Hansen's red flag bill, and so people I need
to get the bill in front of me. There were problems with that bill. First and foremost is that we're grabbing the guns before the person has due process rights.
But hey, Rob, how many bills pass as they're introduced?
Not many.
So there's many opportunities. And a
like
lot
I
of
said,
people
listen. Don't attack me. I'm defending the right of people to change their mind. I am open to a red flag bill. Right?
You finally are right. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. We need to leave the door open for that people can come around and agree with us, and we don't keep attacking them because of their previous positions.
I'm just not used to people coming around to my position on things, Rob. So I'm just weird about it.
Well, that's the issue. Is that's my point. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. That being said, if you're going to go around arguing that you are, this perfect paragon of ideology, then I'm sorry, you're going to have to be consistent or explain why you've changed your mind. Like, what has changed, and if it is like, listen, I now I have some personal experience with this. I have a new point of view, and that's going to change my outlook. There's nothing wrong with that. Just admit it. Like, I don't, and that is one thing that bothers me is like, we can't let people change their minds anymore.
I think we absolutely should let people change their minds, but I get frustrated that people only change their minds when they don't believe other folks until something happens to them, right? I think we should also be able to trust experts and that kind of thing. So let me just say one of my takeaways is Carla Rose Hansen sponsors a bill. There's a good reason she sponsors a bill, and that conservatives should take a really good hard look at it because eventually she's going to be proven right.
I think she's a good policymaker. I think she's ideologically, I think she's wrong most of the time. But I think she's one of the adults in the room, which is those are that's why I want to have her on the show. Those are the people I want to have debates with, and I think right now we can find common ground on something. And I don't want to get into a red flag law debate. We'll talk about that next week. How do you feel like the shape of these races? I just at the beginning of this, I was talking about some of the polling numbers. I've been made aware of, and again, a big grain of salt because I haven't seen polling memos or anything like that. But these races are being polled. It's not being released publicly, but there is a lot of confidence right now outside of District 8, which I think a lot of people are looking at as a toss-up right now. But I got to think, if the Bastiats only win in like a District 8, that's just more bad news after about a year and a half of bad news for them.
Yeah, Rob, it's really interesting. Even before this polling came out, when you and I have talked about these races, District 8 was always the one that was sort of like, it didn't feel like, I think I told you the story of driving up 83 and seeing Magram out knocking on doors. I mean, clearly they're working hard. Anecdotally, I drove through District 20 yesterday, and I will tell you, Belts, Haggart, and Lem, the incumbent people, have a lot more yard signs than the other folks. Driving through District 24, Dwight Kiefert has a lot more yard signs than the other folks there. I think District 7, the race between Retha Mathern and Heilman. I think it's Heilman.
Matthew Heilman, yeah.
Yeah, I just saw a mail piece that he put out that basically said teachers should be arrested.
I saw that. He was put statutory, because we passed the ban on critical race theory, and so he wants to add, I forget how he put it. It was like statutory consequences or something like that.
Yeah, but so now we're going to start arresting teachers if you don't like something that
that's what that means. I mean, if it's a statutory consequence, then it means some sort of a a criminal charge in the code,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
What other consequence can there be?
we can't get anybody to be teachers, but now if you accidentally say something that a parent doesn't like, you're going to get arrested. I mean, come on. I mean, that's not a serious discussion, right? I mean, that's just not a serious conversation about what's happening. So I think District 7, that House seat, I think District 8 is another place that's interesting. I agree with you. I think most of the Senate races are going to go to sort of the establishment candidates. I mean, Sean Cleary and Ryan Eckroth in my home district, I don't see a lot of activity from Eckroth right now. He put up a bunch of yard signs early on. Sean just seems to be more active in my mailbox and on my doors than Eckroth campaign is.
The what I told you is Eckroth's within about 5 points of Cleary is what I'm told. And again, I don't know, but it surprises me that it's that tight. What a lot of my friends in Bismarck tell me is that Eckroth has Eckroth Music, I guess, although he has no connection to the business that I'm aware of. That name, it's a very prominent business that has a lot of people like it. Everybody's kid who was in marching band or something got their instruments from Eckroth Music, and so he's benefiting from some of that. Was one of the theories that I heard. It surprises me that one's as close as it is.
Well, and I think that's a good theory, the Eckroth music theory. And I also think the fact is the Cleary name is well known, but it's often associated with a former Democrat legislator, Audrey Cleary, Sean's grandmother, who was a wonderful legislator. Sean was very close to. So I don't know if there's something. I'm
sure that Sean probably loved his grandmother and disagreed with her on politics. Imagine that's possible. That you don't agree. I remember somebody. In fact, the forum did a profile on me one time, and the reporter asked my dad whether he agreed with me all the time, and he said, "No, hell no, I don't." Right?
Well, I think I've told this story on here before about sending emails to Erin after she voted wrong on something. And basically saying, would you listen more to Jessica and Nicole? They were right on this thing. Would you go talk to them about it? I mean, I don't agree. You don't agree with your spouse on everything. I mean, I barely agree with myself on everything.
Yeah. Listen, I will tell you that is one of the things that turns me off a lot. Not just the Bastiats, although they're guilty of it, but I think anybody who's involved in politics who comes to it with that just absolute sense of God is on our side or history is on our side or whatever. Like, if you are so convinced of your own righteousness, I think that's a dangerous thing. I think it's not just a recipe for bad policy, taken far enough. It's a recipe for extremism.
Yeah, and the opposition should be the opposition. The opposition should not be the enemy. And we should be able to talk to people in our family or not in our family who maybe have a different political leanings. And again, I don't know if Sean's sister identifies as a Democrat or Republican or anything. I mean, as far as I can tell, she's somebody who's very engaged in her community. And that's a pretty good thing from my perspective.
It is for sure. All right. Well, coming up on the show, Congressman Kelly Armstrong is going to be joining me on Friday. I'm actually trying to book the governor for next week for one of the shows. I'm gunning for Wednesday. We'll see which day he's going to come on. So that should be very interesting. Representative Carla Rose Hansen's going to be on. We'll talk about gun control. I'm going to ask Congressman Armstrong too about, what does he see? What's possible at the federal level? Because I think it's not, there's a problem here. I mean, it's not school shootings. I think sometimes in our minds, mass shootings, they happen more often than they really do. I mean, we're a nation with 300 and some odd million people, but like terrorist attacks, because they're so symbolic, because they're so influential, they still matter, right? And they matter above and beyond, not because the lives are more important, but they matter more than maybe sort of the routine homicide. But it's both, right? I mean, it's the routine of armed robbery and gun violence and everything else in this country that I think we can address. And then it's also the mass, the sort of these unicorn mass shooter events. We need to do something that addresses both. And I think there's things that can be done, starting with enforcing a lot of the laws we already have on the books, which we are not. The NICS database can be improved. I think ATF enforcement of laws we already have can be improved. I think some compromised version of a red flag law I would rather probably see it come from state level than federal level. But again, I think these are things that we can do without violating the Second Amendment.
So, Rob, I'm really looking forward to your conversation with Congressman Armstrong on Friday. I happened to have a conversation with him last week, and I was really happy with sort of his thoughtfulness and sort of, really thinking about this issue and if there's things that can be done. On the red flag law, I think, I agree. I'd rather have the states doing it, but in places where states are doing it, maybe there's some funding that can help implement it from the feds.
That was one of the things that I learned. And then I think like 19 states have red flag laws, and he's actually a guy who at one point worked for the NRA. I don't know if he still does, but I saw he made the point. Not one of those states, the only thing those red flags laws do is they remove the guns, and then that's it. There's no follow up for mental health or anything like that. I would like to see any red flag law that we pass. I want to be a process. Like, okay, they're a danger. There's a problem. We establish that. There's a strong due process. We establish that by the court. Okay, what's the path to getting them better then? After that,
yep.
And even, I would even describe it. What's a path to getting them to be back to a place where they can own guns again and have all their rights as a United States citizen?
Absolutely, but we have to fund that, right? Just the same way when people talk about mental health, we should be funding more mental health professionals in our schools and training more mental health professionals in our schools. It needs to be all of the above. It can't just be one thing. I also agree that it can't just be about mass shooting events. It needs to be about gun violence everywhere in our country.
Absolutely. Chad, until next week.
All right, good talk. See ya.
Want more political news like this? Visit inforum.news/port to get 3 months of unlimited access to our news network for only 99 cents a month. Don't wait. Get this limited time offer at inforum.news/port now.